Greetings, Pastor Steve checking in with you about Leading with a Limp, chapter 12. Interesting chapter. The community of character. No one grows to maturity alone. How do we understand ourselves? How do we talk about ourselves? What kind of stories do we tell at work? All really matters. Kind of the summary statement I got out of it from the beginning of the chapter was this. Every leader is a storyteller who narrates on behalf of the community the core reasons for its existence. A community of good characters must tell honest and compelling stories in order to be a transformative community. And there's a big difference. I mean, some people we know when they tell their stories, I've watched in groups of people before and someone starts telling a story and people check out. They roll their eyes, they start looking away. They know the story's not true or it's exaggerated or it's overdone. But when someone tells a true story about what really has happened, what's going on, and how it affects the lives of people, everybody listens very, very carefully. He goes through a number of things to kind of get us to the point of participating in truth, not just making good decisions, but finding the truth and being a part of it and actually living it out. He begins with talking about the deceit of sin, and he talks about the word spin. And we spin a story so it makes us look good. Spin attempts to tell a flawless story with sizzle and flair, whereas truth is always more complex and gray. That's why it can be hard to just tell the truth, because it's not always exciting. It's just true. We have this temptation to spin things, and particularly for leaders, and we like certainty and we like people to follow us. Well, we can spin a decision in a certain way that we know people will like it, but are we telling the truth? Or are we just spinning? Important things to consider. He talks about the freeing burden of truth. Important sentence. We will not risk entering into truth unless we are surrounded by a community that seizes the opportunity to name the truth and then, this is very important, to stand with the one whose knees buckle when faced with the truth. In other words, we're not going to tell the truth to people that we work with unless we know they'll listen, forgive, and give us a chance to be restored. If that's not an option, we'll just stay hidden with all of our secrets. I thought about my experience with staff over the years, and I've had staff who've come to me and said, I've lied to you. I've had staff come and say, I got a DUI. And I think the reason they were able to do that is because they had a strong commitment to truth, but also because they knew I would listen and I would work with them toward restoration, not toward condemnation. And so the truth can be freeing if we know when we tell the truth, people are going to work with us and they want to restore us and lift us up. And that's what we want for the people we work with and serve. Then he talks about hearing your story and how the character is formed in the midst of hearing and telling the full story. And in order to better comprehend the story of God, what God is doing, a leader has to enter into their own story without any spin. I mean, I can tell my life story and spin it so it sounds really good in a certain way, or I can just tell my life story truthfully, and there's ups and downs, and I've done things well, I've done things badly. But only when I know my true story and tell it honestly and can I begin to see what God is doing. Otherwise, I spin it so I don't need God. And I should leave God out. And then there's the tension of truth. To grow in character, we must not deny or hide from the reality of our own unique dignity, that we're created in God's image, we're good at some things, we got gifts, we have skills, and we must not hide or deny the reality of our own depravity. We stumble, we fall, we sin, we have weaknesses, and the truth puts both those things side by side. I have unique dignity, and I'm depraved. Steve's both. And that's the tension of truth. And Spin wants to just remove the bad part, right? So he talks about participating in truth, which is not just making good decisions or problem solving. I thought about being a leader, and I thought, a lot of times I'm just solving problems. How should we approach this situation? And that's different than actually participating in the truth and living it. So first stage of participating in truth, he says exploration. You have to know some basic things about yourself. Who are you? Where are you going? What do you want? And how will you get there? That's exploration, knowing yourself, knowing your organization, basic questions. And then there starts to be dialogue. And dialogue, if we're honest, we're talking through issues with co-leaders or subordinates or whoever it is we're with, volunteers, whatever. Dialogue can be really valuable, but it gets messy and can sometimes even muddy the water because people see things we just didn't see. We have to take that in consideration. And then comes the time for discernment. This is who we are, this is where we're going, this is how we want to get there. And we've talked it through and we've listened to different perspectives on things. And now we have to discern what to do. And he talks about discernment as a really helpful way, which is we want to discern what to do, putting God at the center. What would God have us to do in this situation? Not what's best for profit, not what's best for this or for that. You have to take all those things into consideration. But there's a higher concern. If God's at the center of who we are and what we're doing, how will we discern this decision? And then, of course, we make the decisions. And truth is so essential, this whole process, to own it, to participate in it, because organizations that won't tell the truth cannot make good decisions. If we pretend we're better than we are and things are failing and we keep pretending we're better than we are, we're headed for disaster. If we tell the truth, we can make good decisions. We can move forward. Dave Moffat told a great story about some things he learned in life in terms of working with a life kind of planning coach person, realizing there's some really important people in his life he hadn't been listening to. And his eyes got open and he made major readjustments. Being a better participator in the truth of listening to the truth, what's really going on in his life. Then we got around the tables and started talking about questions about decision-making and process. The first was simply the anxiety sometimes we have about decision-making. Think through your decision-making process and a decision you currently face. What is your greatest anxiety as you prepare to make the decision? What's the anxiety? Interesting discussion. At table, sometimes people say, well, I really don't have anxiety about making decisions. If I know who I am, what's going on, the non-negotiables, I can make decisions easily. Some of us, we want to know all the details. We want to do all the research so there's no unanswered question whatsoever before we make a decision. Some of us get anxious because we're trying to keep everybody happy, which of course is not going to work. So what's your anxiety like in your decision-making process? Are you aware of that about yourself? Because that actually affects how you're making your decision. And then secondly, we talked about the actual decision-making process and just gave ourselves some time to think about, now wait a minute, how do I make a decision? Typically. What do I go through? How do I get my information? Who do I consult? What studies, information do I go after? What customers do I talk to? What other colleagues do I consult? As I think about how I usually go about making this decision-making process, what is the weakest step in your process? The weakest step. And you know it. You know what it is. And does it fall into the realm of, I'm not exploring enough, I don't know enough about who I am and what I'm after and what the goals are, or I don't have enough dialogue with people, or I'm just not doing discernment with God at the center at all. What's your weakest step in your process? At our table, I shared that I love to get things done fast. I love to make decisions and move on, get the next thing done. And I've had to learn over time that can be a great advantage. Some decisions you can just make quick and move on, but important decisions, no. I have to stop myself. I have to slow down. I have to talk with staff. I have to get information. And I have to be content to make tentative decisions until they get talked through and we really get to where we really need to be with the discernment process. That can be my weak point. And I know that about myself. And so for numbers of decisions in my life, I just make them quick and move on. They're nothing but moderate level, big decisions. I have to rein myself in and go, no, the goal is not to get it done, Steve. That's not the goal. The goal is to participate in the truth involved in this process, and it's going to take some time, and it's going to be worth taking the time. And I've had to learn to talk myself down. I don't know what your particular weakness is in your decision-making process, but it's just good to know what it is, because more likely than not, whatever your weak point is in your decision-making process, the more stressful and important the decision is, the more important it is that you pay attention to that weak spot and develop it so it's not a weak spot. Make better decisions. Then we talked, number 3, about avoiding spin. Knowing that every time you announce a decision, someone in your organization will be disappointed or frustrated. That's leadership reality, right? How have you been tempted to spin an announcement in an attempt to quiet critics? And what do you need to do to guard against drifting into spin? And I mentioned to the group, I said, if you want a perfect example of spin, tune into any White House press conference. It doesn't matter who the president is. It just doesn't matter. Listen to the questions and listen to the answers. It's all spin. The questions are spun and the answers are spun. No one's talking to anyone, really. Everything's being spun out so everybody makes themselves look good. It's ridiculous. But the problem is we're not used to leaders not spinning things. Right? I mean, what leader's honest with us? We expect to be lied to or at least spun in a certain direction so we don't quite see the things that aren't the best with this idea. And we talked about, how do you avoid that? For me as a pastor, I've realized, particularly early on, and I still feel it once in a while, it rises up in me and I have to say, no, Steve, don't want to do that. If people have hot button issues, whatever they may be, it doesn't matter, and we're talking about them, I've been around long enough that I know I can address that issue in a certain way and just calm things down right away. But in doing so, I won't be addressing some things that we need to talk about. And so every once in a while, it doesn't happen often, but once in a while I go, I feel it, that desire to spin, so it just makes the conversation easier. I go, no, let's go after the truth here, because in the long run, it'll be way more beneficial for everyone. So that was this week. Participating in truth, getting away from that spin business, being able to be honest and open, and great benefit to an organization or church or business, whatever you're in, to seek truth together. It's a great calling. Next week, chapter 13, we're getting down, last 2 lunches coming up, and I think we may tack a third one on, so it'll be 3 more weeks, and we'll kind of evaluate, assess what we've been talking about, and then we'll be looking for ways in which things you think you can need additional help, encouragement, or guidance on, things we can do to be helpful to each other. So get ready for that too. So thanks for this week. Catch you next week. Bye.